Hi, friends. Welcome to the Full and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Meg McCabe. And if you're here, it means you're ready for some aha moments that will inspire you to create a more vibrant, authentic life that's full of joyful moments, deeper connections, inner peace, and courageous action towards your dreams. Let's get started. Do you identify as a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser? Do you have trouble saying no to others? And do you have difficulty putting yourself first? Do you have trouble identifying with and expressing your needs because you might be afraid to lose a relationship? Well, today's episode is for you, my friends. Today's guest is Nimisha Mehta. Nimisha is an empowerment coach who helps individuals transform their self-image from the inside out. She helps people reveal their authentic expression and foster a deeper sense of empowerment and confidence. In today's episode, I dive deep into the topic of people pleasing with Nimisha. In this episode, we talk about what people pleasing is, what it looks like, and what it's rooted in. We also talk about healing, people pleasing, and connecting more to your authentic self and honoring your needs once and for all. We also talk about boundaries and how they can be really helpful in letting go of your people pleasing ways. I know my audience, and I know that all of you are going to adore this episode. And if it helps you, I encourage you to send it to a friend. And with that, I hope you enjoy this episode of Full and Thriving. Hello, Nimisha. How are you today?
Hi, Meg. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing so great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're going to have a great time because I know that the topic we've chosen to talk about today is so important for the listeners. And as you know, we have decided to talk about people pleasing. And I think before we dive into that, I'd love to hear more about your background and who you are on a professional level and even on a personal level.
Thank you. Yes, I'm actually a coach, but before that, I'll give you a little background. I was born in Tanzania in East Africa, and my background is I'm of Indian origin, but I wasn't born there. I was born in Tanzania in East Africa. And I've lived in England, I've lived in Canada for a few years. My parents still live there, so I am Canadian as well. And now I'm in the US. I'm a coach as well as a lifetime personal growth enthusiast.
I love that. Wow, you sound like you've lived everywhere. What was it like in Tanzania?
It was amazing. My childhood truly was innocent. And talking about people pleasing actually does come from my childhood being so secure, thinking that everybody is just like me and, rainbows and sparkles everywhere. So
Oh my
I,
gosh.
yeah, we were so naive. Seriously, we really, really were so naive because we didn't have a lot of access to the Western world, television wise, or even just the internet connects us. But we didn't have any of that. So I grew up really very traditionally playing outdoors, having friends that were truly just kind. I never got bullied. It was, yeah, utopia, if you can say
Oh
so.
my gosh. Wow. I want to move to Tanzania right now. That sounds so beautiful, but I can completely relate because I had a secure childhood too. And I grew up with this impression that everyone you love treats each other kindly, everyone respects each other, everyone pitches in to help when you need it. And like growing up, it was a rude awakening for me as well. When you're off in the world, making your own adult relationships and having your own interactions. So that's so relatable. But I'm really curious, how did Tanzania and that experience in childhood play into your people pleasing tendency? And what did that look like for you?
I think mostly for me, it's coming from an Indian background that played into the people pleasing because a lot of the way that we grow up, and there was a community that I grew up in. So most of my friends grew up this way. So I didn't know any better. And so a lot of us grow up, especially if you're the first child as well as a girl child, that's like a double whammy. That is just like the
Mm.
recipe for being a people pleaser. And so you just tend to want to do everything in your power to make your parents and to make society happy. That is your job. You don't ask questions and you don't do what is against the norm. And the norm being, things need to be modest, you need to be quiet little girl, good little girl. So there was a lot of that pressure around me, myself, and my friends. So it wasn't like I had this one rebel friend that we just said, we want to be like her. In fact, this is sad to admit, but now that I've grown, I see this in myself that that rebel girl was someone that we criticized. That she
Mm.
wasn't like us, and that was wrong. And it was completely wrong of us of doing that. I can see that now, but it was really just a tight-knit circle of generation after generation, women growing up just suppressing each other.
Oh, wow. That is loaded right there. Did you feel in your circle that there was much depth? Like, did you feel like you could be authentic with each other where everyone has this perfectionistic, like, exterior?
No. Easy answer. No, because of the fact that there were certain things that you could not say out loud, even to your best friend. You would be
Mm.
judged. You would be judged for it. And there was no such thing as no judgment. There were certain things that you just did not speak about. A lot of that had to do with sexuality, a lot of it had to do with sensuality, and
Mm.
all of that was taboo. You just didn't feel comfortable enough to speak it out loud if you felt a certain way about it. But anything that was open to speak was totally fine. And you got a lot of support and stuff from each other. But I don't think when you asked about depth, I don't think that's deep enough. So no, the answer is there wasn't a lot of depth.
Mm. I'm relating to this on so many levels. Even though I grew up in suburbia, Connecticut, USA, I felt like, and I don't know if you feel the same way, the pressure to be the good girl and put everyone first and make sure everyone around you is happy. That made me completely disconnect from my emotions as a human. Like, I actually had no pulse on negative emotions. I didn't really grapple with identifying those or really feeling into them for years until I was like a teenager and everything confronts you, right? But I don't know, how was your relationship with your emotions during your childhood?
I completely relate to what you just said. Everything that you said, absolutely. In fact,
Yeah.
until and this is going to sound a little crazy, but I think until I turned 40, I didn't even know what my real needs were. Like, what do I really
Mm.
need and like? Not even my likes and dislikes. I only liked what other people thought that I should like. And I looked very proper because you have to, right? You're carrying your family name. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that in the Indian culture is that you're carrying the family name. You cannot shame us. And it's only geared toward women. So that's one thing that I had no idea what my needs really are. And also, I thought I was very, very clingy and needy because I demanded certain amount of attention, whether it's friendship or
Mm.
whether it's relationships. I wanted attention from those people.
Mm.
Now I realize that that is very normal and that
Mm.
everybody else wasn't emotionally available to me. And they would just gaslight me into saying things like, I'm too much. Emotionally, I was too much. So, emotion
Wow.
wise, I was told that it was too much if I asked for this or that. So, I was told to be more practical.
Oh my goodness. Wow. It's like from the outside, lots of utopia, like outdoors with friends, playing outside, all the fun things. But then emotionally, it's not quite utopia when you dig in and look at the truth. And so, I think that whole concept of, first of all, like blaming yourself for everyone else's issue. Like everyone's emotionally unavailable, and you're blaming yourself and saying, "Oh, it's me. I'm clingy. Nobody
I'm
wants
too,
to connect
I'm too
to me."
sensitive. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. Classic.
and
It's
that's so
like,
true. It's self-blame.
uh, so you also mentioned that you didn't even really connect with your own sense of your own needs until you were almost 40. So what was the thing that woke you up to recognizing you have needs?
Oh my God. You can call it a spiritual awakening if you like, but I think
Hmm.
for me, it was during the pandemic. And for me, it was just being in a place of such loneliness internally, right? And just being faced with so many things that were, I would swipe under, the carpet and just not think about. And I would feel certain emotions. And then to get rid of them, I'd just go out for a walk or something, or meet a friend and talk about something nonsensical that had no relation to my emotions and how I was really feeling. So I was superb at that. And so during the pandemic, all of that came out for all of us, I'm sure. But for me, I was facing myself. And there was this feeling of, and this is a little sad, but it is part of me, is that I was feeling like if I didn't exist, it would make no difference to anyone. And so I guess I was in the place of completely giving up on myself. And that's
Mhm.
where I realized, how could I? How could I give up on myself? There had to be another way. There had to be a way for me to realize that I was better than what I was projecting. So I got help. I got therapy and I got help, external help, because that led me to believe in myself, to actually look inwards and realize, what am I really made up of? What do I like, really like? What do I dislike?
Mhm.
What's my worth, really? Like,
Mhm.
am I worthy of being treated a certain way, or can I stand up for myself?
Wow. Wow. And so was it your therapist who kind of brought you to this point of self-discovery?
You know what? My therapy sessions were me just like talking. I swear my therapist was like, can you give me a minute to like reflect something back? Because it was all Meg. I was holding on to like a whole like, ocean of things that I hadn't spoken about. So I would just talk, 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 talk. So I got rid of all of it. And then after that, I got coaching because the therapist
Oh.
could, yeah. So the therapist could only take me to a certain level. Then I got coaching to take that, whatever information was out there now, to take all of that and then start picking and choosing what I wanted and what I wanted to discard. And how do I move
Wow.
forward with that in my life? Like, how do I apply that all of this?
Wow. So, what was the greatest challenge for you when it comes to breaking free of that old pattern?
Biggest one is that I'm not a good girl anymore.
Oh.
I don't get to people
Oh.
please. I don't get to be liked anymore.
What did
That was
that feel like?
It feels like crap. It really does. Every single day you say whatever you want to say. Immediately after, you feel guilty. You blame yourself for something's wrong with you, or you think that you're selfish. That's a big one.
Mm. So, how did that look for you? Like, because I assume boundaries enter at some point, right?
Yeah.
So, when you were healing from your people pleasing mentality, what did you have to do? What actions did you have to take to reclaim your life in a way?
The first thing I had to do is I had to make a list of my non-negotiables. Like,
Mm.
this will not do. This is my worth, and this will not do. And then I had to apply that to my life in terms of, so what happens if somebody does it? And that's where,
Mhm.
the no came in. I needed to say no. And how do I do that when I'm
Mm.
so, just every part of my body wants to say yes desperately, because then that
Mhm.
person won't hate me.
Mm. So, what did your list look like? I'm really interested how the people pleasing manifested in your life.
The number one thing on my list was that nobody can yell at me.
Yes, go you.
I
Ah,
know that it sounds like, well, that's an obvious. No, not for me, it wasn't. It was not an
honestly, it's
obvious.
kind of, I relate to that. I had such a, like, I call it a kumbaya childhood. Like, nobody yelled in my house, really. And if there were disagreements, my parents did not keep me privy to that. Like, they had,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So I was very contained. And so growing up, I found myself in a relationship where I'd get yelled at. And I had no idea what to do with that. I was confused and stunned for a few years before I realized I had to take action and get out of that situation. But it was like when I didn't have awareness of that dynamic in a relationship, I had no idea what to do with it. And before I knew it, those boundaries had been crossed, right? I had these boundaries that were set up by a safe environment growing up. And then suddenly I found myself in an environment where that boundary went out the window and I had no idea how to enforce that boundary or even like change it. Right. So I really also connect with your yelling boundary. I feel so sad to hear that that was your biggest thing.
The thing is, while you were saying that, I realized that I grew up in a very opposite way where yelling was very normal because in Indian
Oh,
households, it's very normal to yell at your kids, right? So I grew up with yelling. So for me, when I had yelling in any part of my other, like my relationships or whatever, I thought it was normal. This,
mm,
this is just what we do, you know? So I
yeah.
thought for you, it was like it's not normal, but yet you let that into your life as like, well, I guess, you know, because you were stunned into accepting it. And
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
just, I guess, conditioned into accepting it.
It's interesting because it's kind of what you have to talk about in therapy. Like you said, you have to kind of think about what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. And
That's
so
right.
you grew up in your world, yelling was culturally acceptable. And as an adult, you had to reject that concept.
Yes. And that also came with everyone else in my life being aware of this and now realizing everyone in my life does this, including myself. So I had to stop myself from, and I still am working on it. You know, I'm
Mm,
not going to say I'm perfect because sometimes your anger leads to you not thinking too straight. And so you
mhm,
automatically jump to yelling. But I know that because it's a non negotiable for me, it's also a non negotiable for me to do it. And so
mm,
if I ever do it, I will immediately apologize for it profusely
mm,
because I know how much I don't want it done to me.
That's such a good point. Like, if you're going to create a boundary, you have to make sure you're holding yourself up to the same standard.
Exactly. Because
Mm,
they say don't tell someone your boundary, show them.
hmm.
So if I've
Powerful.
ever had, yeah. So if I'm ever in an argument with you and I don't name call you, then you don't get to do that to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I have to,
Absolutely.
you know, I have to hold myself accountable for the things that I feel that I don't deserve. You don't
Hmm.
either.
Hmm. Wow. So, first of all, I love this concept because it encourages you to level up your life, right? Like, I am not willing to accept this from other people, and therefore I cannot accept this within my own behavior. And I think most people need to look and make sure they're doing that, right? Um,
Exactly. And it helps you
mhm.
realize the other person's mindset as well. Like, how hard is it for me to demand this kind of thing when I can't show up as this person either, you know? So it's not that easy to just be like, hey, this is my non-negotiable list. Go work on it. It's like, wait, are you working on it? Because, you know,
Mm,
it's not fair for me to just ask someone else to change when I need to realize how difficult it is for me to change.
wow. Internal reflection is so valuable when it comes to setting boundaries. That makes so much sense. What else was on your list? Just
So,
curious.
so this is the big one. Another one that for me is it's still something that I work on. It's that there are certain things, they call them love languages, but for me,
Hmm.
they are just needs that I would really like in my life, that I really appreciate in my life, but I don't need them externally. Because if I start doing that, then I start having attachments, which is not so great for
Hmm.
us to be living a
Hmm.
life on Earth, which we came alone to, and we're going to leave alone. It's just not a good idea to start having these types of attachment and expectations. So for me, the next non-negotiable was that I needed to be aware of what my love languages are so that I can be able to speak up
Mm.
and say, hey, you know what? This is not working for me right now. And that was something that a people pleaser will never do. Just it's
Mhm.
communication because I'm going to lose
Mhm.
this person. There's that
Mhm.
attachment and that codependency of, oh no, I can't say something because I'm going to lose them. So
Wow.
another non-negotiable is I need to have clear communication with this human being, whoever that person is, whether it's a friend, relationship, it doesn't even matter, coworker. If there is no open communication, that means I don't get to speak.
Mm. So, what I love about your list and what you just shared is that it forced you to start identifying your needs and
Yeah.
enforcing your needs, which is what you said was the greatest struggle at first was this whole realization of like I actually have needs and they matter. So, once you identified those and wrote them on your list of non-negotiables, what was it like enforcing them?
I'm still working on that. I
Mm.
won't lie. And you are, I think, forever going to be working on it as long as you're alive,
Mhm.
unless you go up in the Himalayas somewhere and meditate the rest of your life. People are going because I say this all the time. I'm like, if you really want to know if you've leveled up, start having people around you
Mm.
because they're the ones that bring out the emotions. If you're sitting by yourself in your house watching TV and living like an amazing wellness, I wake up at 5 a.m., I read, I yoga, I go to work, I'm so awesome. You're not going to feel any emotions because you're not triggering yourself.
Interesting.
Other people
Interesting.
are triggering you. So that's where the triggers come from. That's where you realize where the growth is. And till date, I realize how many little blind spots I have when it comes to growth because I am completely open to people in my life coming in and
Mm.
leaving both. But that's the biggest challenge is living with people around you and getting triggered and realizing that, okay, how do I place these boundaries and get myself to actually be accountable to keep these boundaries intact so that I don't abandon myself because I
Hmm.
have the biggest tendency for somebody who's been a certain way for years is to go back to what is automatic
Hmm.
because it's safe zone and I can't
Mm.
be there anymore. It may have helped me at that time keep me safe, but now I need to realize that setting those boundaries and keeping them intact is the safe zone. Even if it's uncomfortable, it's actually
Hmm.
safe for my soul.
Hmm. Hmm. So when you are triggered
Mm,
and you realize a boundary needs to be set, say you need to limit access to yourself,
mm,
right? I see that a lot. Like usually a boundary is like, I need less time with this person, or maybe this person has pushed the boundaries too much and I don't really want them in my life anymore. How do you start to limit access to yourself and also enforce those boundaries? Because I think that's the biggest struggle for people is they will shout their boundaries from the mountaintops. And then the second someone violates their boundaries, they crumble. And it's like the boundary never existed. They default into people pleasing. And it's like they've only done half the work. And I think that's been a huge growth point for me is recognizing the importance of, okay, you have to express your boundaries. And then if someone violates those, you literally have to hold up your end of the bargain.
Yes. Okay, so these are the three things. This is
Okay.
amazing because I do this all the time. So these are the three things that will keep you from upholding your boundary. And you think that they're good things, but they are not. Number one, your empathy. If you're an empathetic human being, you will use your empathy to abandon your own boundary because you think that you're
Mhm.
so empathetic. And so you understand how the other person feels, and
Mhm.
you don't want to hurt their feelings. And the second thing is kindness. I'm such a kind human being. How can I be unkind to this person, even if they're, a quote unquote beep to me? I need to be kind. I'm a kind person. And third, and most importantly, is that's not nice. That's not a nice thing to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
So empathy, niceness, kindness will ruin, trample your own boundaries.
That is so true. I think there's this myth out there that people think boundaries are mean
Hmm.
and that they're rude, and I like to try to think of them as neutral, because if you think of them in any other way, it's going to be impossible, especially if you're an empathetic, kind person, to set them. So I like to think of boundaries as neutral and like non-negotiably respected, right? Like they need to be respected. So I think it's interesting how those beautiful values and traits that people have can actually backfire when it comes to setting boundaries.
I love that you called it neutral, but let me ask you something. What if you set a boundary that you think is neutral, but I think is mean because you set it against me?
I will have to just remind myself it's neutral for me, because I know it can be interpreted as mean,
Yeah.
but you have to strip it back down to the facts, right? Like this person consistently hurts me. This person consistently doesn't listen to what I request. Like I can't give this person any more chances because I know what the outcome is. I know what the pattern is. It's neutral for me. And if it's hard for them to accept, it just reflects the work that they need to do, not the work that I've already done. So that's how I think of boundaries and why they are neutral. Even though it could be hurtful to that person, setting them is not a hurtful thing to do.
I love that. I love that. And that's so great to remind yourself every single day that you feel sorry for the person.
That work is on them. I've been doing the inner work.
Yeah, you're not being mean. But
Exactly.
that's one thing that I'm working on as well. It's such a
Hmm.
it's such a big deal for me to be working on something that like I feel empathetic towards the other
Hmm.
person and I understand where they're coming from and their childhood and all of that, psychological stuff that you feel like I can defend them with. But
Hmm.
really, it's your defense of them is going against your own sort of well-being.
Absolutely. You can make excuses for everybody. I mean, if you're empathetic, you can see through that lens and look at the world through their eyes and be like, I understand why they're an asshole. Like they
Yeah,
grew up in a bad environment. They were treated that way by their parents. They were bullied and all these, like, someone has a million reasons from a psychological perspective to end up the way they've ended up. But at the end of the day, their work needs to be done. I'm being a little
exactly. Do the
blunt right
work
now.
because I'm doing the
Yeah.
work. Do the work. Love it.
Hmm. Hmm. So you mentioned these things that kind of get in the way. Like these are common errors people make when setting boundaries. But how do you bring yourself to actually enforce them?
I think you have to remind yourself of how valuable you really are. Because if you're not realizing your own, I guess I don't want to use the word standards, but I think that's what it is. You have certain standards, and because you've worked really hard on your energy. So why would you just start giving it away for free to people who don't value it as much as
Mhm.
you value it? It's like you beautify your home and then just let people trample all over it.
Mm.
There is no one in the universe that would do that. They wouldn't even think twice to let the person know, hey, can you take your shoes off? This is a really nice place. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Physically, it makes no sense. Something, if you had a brand new car and somebody started like just making scratches on it, that would not be acceptable. And yet, with our life, we work so hard on our beautiful energy, and then we let people kind of treat it like it's not valuable and that
Mhm.
it's just another person. I'm not just another person.
Right. That's so true. I think it's unfortunately how you let people treat you is a reflection of how you value yourself, which sucks
It
because
does
everyone's like,
suck.
it really sucks because you want to be that person who's like, I value me. I
Yeah.
do value me. But then you have to look around and say, like, really see if that's true based on the way people are treating you. And it's up to you to hold that standard. So reminding yourself of your worth and your value, such a good piece of advice.
And I think another thing that we do is we're scared of losing people. I'm
Mm.
a big
Hmm.
proponent of reminding myself of like, so what happens then? So I lost this person. I go all the way. I play the whole
Hmm.
scenario out. Okay,
Hmm.
so you lost them. Now what? Really, now what?
Interesting.
It's gonna hurt for a
Hmm.
few days, maybe a few years, and then what? You're a human being. You didn't come with anyone. So there is nothing that you can quote unquote lose. But what happens is we end up chasing because we are so like, oh my God, I cannot lose this person. So when you
Hmm.
chase, imagine, so this is in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says this. He says, imagine a flowing river and you put your hand, a closed fist, inside it. Like you put your hand inside the river and you close your fist to get a fistful of water. What are you going to get? Nothing.
Nothing.
You're
Yeah.
not, you're not going to be able to get a fistful of water.
Right.
That's not possible. That's what chasing
Mhm.
is. It's trying to get a fistful of water. What you do is you put your hand in it and you cup it. When you cup your hand and you put it inside the river, the water will flow right into your hand. And then you can drink that
Mm.
water. So
Mm.
that's the whole mindset of letting things come to you. And if they're meant to be, they'll stay with you because they
Mhm.
love your energy and you love theirs. And that's just how it is. But if something is not allowing itself to even appreciate you, for whatever reason,
Mhm.
like you said, there are a million reasons. I don't really need them. Just let me know that I'm not valuable to you. That's all I
Nice.
require.
Right.
But the
Right.
chasing is just like, oh my God, please value me. Please value me because I'm so awesome. And this comes from a people pleasing childhood as well, of course, of people not picking us, especially our parents. That's usually the biggest sort of heartbreak of
Mm.
not being picked and wanting to be picked so desperately because we're such amazing people.
Hmm. It's interesting because you're like chasing your value from other people, right? Like
Exactly.
instead of trying to see your value from yourself, right? And see it within yourself, you're always chasing that sense of value and being valued from other people. And it's not sustainable,
It's
right?
such an
Because,
ick too,
yeah.
right? Even the people
Mhm.
that want to come closer to you will see this energy and they'll be like, okay, this is an ick. We
Mhm.
don't see it
Mhm.
because we're not looking at our energy. Once we I think what we do is we're so this instant gratification nonsense has gotten to us really like instant
Oh, yeah.
gratification is
Mm-mm.
the worst thing to happen to our society. And I sound very old when I say that. I don't care. But that has ruined mindsets. Seriously, we have no patience for whether it's love or whether it's validation or whether it's business, like proving myself to be, successful at something. There is zero freaking patience. I want this now, overnight. So here we
Right.
are.
Right. I think you can get a really nice false sense of self-worth when you
Mm,
turn to something like social media, right?
yes.
Because
Yes.
you have this actual measurement of how many likes you get and how many views you get. And you're like, wow, I must be so valuable. Look how
Yeah,
many likes I got. But again, it's turning towards external validation instead of looking towards the inside and finding your worth from within.
absolutely. And I think it's the work. You had said this earlier that we don't want to do the work. We want to find
Yeah,
easy solution like, oh, wait, where's the shortcut?
I know. Wouldn't that be so nice?
They're all shortcuts, right? This is all the distractions are shortcuts, and the outside validation is a shortcut.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's really interesting to think about this sense of worth, especially when you think about the enforcing of boundaries, because, like, I want to bring it back to what you said with cupping the water in the river.
Yeah.
I feel like what you can get from that is sometimes you have to set the boundary and let go of that control, right? Like, let go and trust that if that person is meant to be in your life and they truly value you, they will remain in your life after you set the boundary, right? Or they won't be offended by the boundary, or maybe they'll actually listen to your request. So it's like setting a boundary is a really good way to get an honest read on where that person stands in your life. And you need to have that willingness to trust that you are worthy enough to be valued by that person.
I couldn't agree more. You
Mm.
said that so beautifully because
Oh, thank you.
honestly, it's exactly what you're meant to do with, I guess, when you have self-esteem that is really high and also a very detached point of view. And if you
This
want to
detachment.
exactly.
Mhm.
This is exactly what it is. What you just described is detachment. And by the way, if anybody is looking to manifest, that's exactly how you do
Mhm.
it. You put an intention out there and then you let it go. And you trust that whatever intention that you put out there with an open heart and a beautiful energy of working on yourself, it's going to come to you. And you work on yourself. You can't just be like, oh, I'm manifesting, $1 million business, and then you're just sitting on your ass watching TV. Not gonna
Mhm.
happen. You have to put some work into it, but you can't be desperate because
Yeah.
desperation drives anyone away. Just think of a man knocking on your door every single day wanting love from you. That is crazy. You would call the police.
I know. And I totally have been in that desperate place. Like, I remember when I started my business like 10 years ago, I feel like I must have reeked of desperation. And it took so long to surrender and let go and let things be the way that they're meant to be and relax into what I wanted to do instead of control and hang on tight, like choke hold my dreams kind of a thing. So, yeah, if anyone feels like you're giving out the desperate energy, we don't judge you. I think it takes so much time and a lot of life experience to learn about this detachment stuff and get to a place where you are okay with, surrendering the outcome.
Yeah, thank you for admitting and putting out there that thought because I hear you. I can so relate to that
Hmm.
desperation and truly saying this out just for the people that think that it's not working for them. Sometimes, as you said, you have to make the mistakes to learn. Some of us learn practically instead of theoretically, unfortunately.
I'm guilty of that.
Me too. Somebody will tell me 1,000 times the truth, and I will not believe them until I get slapped in the face, and I'm like, I can't hear you. So the universe is happy to step in and slap you. No, I'm kidding.
Everyone learns their own way.
They do. So don't think that we were born with like, or we just woke up and, we are all like just these enlightened beings on here. We are not. We are still learning. We are still struggling with conditioning. And this is an everyday struggle in every single part of your life. It's not just business
Mm.
or with your kids or with your whatever spouse or with your relationships or dating or whatever, your parents, doesn't matter. This applies to everything.
Hmm. Oh man, I just am so grateful to have had you on the show today because I'm having so much fun. And before I let you go, do you have any parting words of wisdom or advice for the listeners today?
I I had an amazing time talking to you. So thank you. I'm so honored to be here on your show. And there's a quote that I wrote down this morning so that I'd love to share with you is that it's from Marcus Aurelius and
Mm.
it goes like this. It says, "You have power over your mind, not outside events."
Mm. Such a
So I
helpful
think
reminder.
Right? So I think that should be like a quote that you write down and stick on some wall or whatever, just to let yourself know that you could be doing so amazingly in your growth process and then suddenly be hit by some circumstances or events that will completely derail you. And that's okay.
Mm.
It's
I love
completely
that.
okay. So I think
Right.
that's one reminder, just for those of us who are beating ourselves up.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. I think it's helpful to have that compassionate view. Like you cannot control everything. You can control how you respond to things, but you can't control everything outside of you, which a people pleaser has definitely tried to do a few times.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we are master manipulators without the tag of like bad people. We want to be,
It's actually pretty sneaky.
isn't it funny how we're master manipulators, but we're always the good ones, right? We're always the nice people. And I'm calling us
Honestly,
all out.
honestly, it's a genius approach, but it's not sustainable and it won't last. And you'll end up feeling horrible,
Mm,
like you shared with your story,
yeah.
lowest of lows. And you will be forced to wake up to valuing yourself at some point. And I
Yes.
think that's the hope. I hope everyone listening was able to get something out of this today. Nimisha, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm so grateful to have you. It was so nice meeting you. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank you, Meg. I appreciate you so much. And I hope that you continue to just spread your beautiful light. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Before I let you go, how can people find you online?
Instagram is the best one. So the
Okay.
Nimisha Mehta is my
Fabulous.
Instagram. Best place to find
Fabulous.
me.
Great. Thank you so much, Nimisha.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes this week's episode of the Full and Thriving podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the show. When you have a moment, please head on over to Instagram and follow my recovery coaching account at Meg_McCabe to stay up to date on everything I'm doing in recovery land. And if you're feeling extra inspired, please send me a direct message to let me know how this podcast has impacted your life. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.